Hello again, everyone. Welcome again to our webinar today. This is about the managed care analytics. Today's session, we will explore some of the things related to the managed markets. We will try to understand what the role of the managed markets are, what are the strategies companies are taking to be more competitive in the marketplace, as well as the key around data that is being leveraged by corporations to be more effective in the marketplace. So before we proceed, a couple logistic items. We have planned for about 10 minutes of Q&A time towards the end of the session, around 11:50 Pacific that would be. And so please, you're welcome to type in your questions in the chat box that you see in the webinar panel that you have on your screen. We will get to them during the Q&A time. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be available under the webinar section on the Pharma.com website. With that, it's a privilege for me to introduce our distinguished panel for today's session. To begin with, I'd like to introduce Ron Cottle, Associate Director, Managed Care Field Operations at Genentech. Ron has many years of experience with a broad background in biopharma, sales, marketing, and managed markets. He has a strong knowledge of managed markets business drivers, and coupled with his solid leadership skills, has been instrumental in leading many successful cross-functional programs at Genentech. He also has extensive experience in sales operations, including incentive compensation, field force optimization, targeting, and he has been very successful in many of these initiatives. Most recently, Ron has been focused on applying his experience and leadership in the managed markets, account management teams, and supporting functions at Genentech. Second, I'd like to introduce Joseph Boyd, who is Director of Marketing Operations at Astellas Pharma. Joe joined Astellas Pharma in September of 2011 to direct various marketing support functions to advance the commercial performance across all therapeutic areas. Prior to Astellas, he played a key role at Inspire Pharmaceuticals, a subsidiary of Merck, in building the medical development, sales, and managed care teams of the organization. Joe has over 15 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry. He is also a frequent speaker at several industry events. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Gordon Romanas, SVP at Business One Technologies. Gordon also has over 15 years of professional experience in PBM, managed care, pharmaceutical manufacturer, and retail pharmacy. He is a senior level manager and contributor in the healthcare analytics, managed care, supply chain management, sales and marketing to multiple healthcare market segments. After graduating from college, Gordon was commissioned as a logistics officer in the United States Marine Corps and served in both Desert Storm and Somalia. Now I'll take a quick couple moments to give you a context of Pharma Technologies, the sponsor of this event. I also want to make sure that I keep my marketing colleagues who helped make this happen smiling at the end. So Pharma has been in the business for over 15 years with a focus on just data and analytics for enterprises. We specialize in taking large complex data streams and transforming them into insights, enabling the business to make effective decisions. We are a global organization headquartered in the United States with offices in San Jose, California, Dublin, Ohio, as well as offices in Europe based in London, United Kingdom, Solothurn in Switzerland, and finally our offshore operations is out of Pune in India. We support 4 key verticals: technology, financial services, public safety, and life sciences and healthcare, which I am the practice leader of. Specifically in the life sciences and healthcare, I'd like to say that we have a deep expertise of over 5 years dealing with all aspects of commercial, including sales, marketing, and managed care, as well as development, where we've done a lot of work around the clinical operations. Pharma has also launched a few innovative solutions, just to name a couple. A sixth sense offering, which is primarily targeted at addressing the big data problem that enterprises are faced with today. This is our attempt to bring all of the structured and unstructured data, be it comment fields, surveys, social media, etc., into the mainstream analytics platform to provide insights which are more refined and more precise to help the businesses make more effective decisions. We will also be launching our managed markets analytics solution in the next few days, and this is, in fact, this webinar is kind of the genesis to prep for this launch. And in this solution, we are attempting to answer several of the key questions that the managed markets business teams are dealing with around formulary, access, product performance, contracting scenarios, utilization, etc. So you should be hearing from us very soon on this solution. With that, I'd like to dive into our first topic of discussion today, which is around the significance of the managed markets in today's pharma companies. For this, I'd like to ask Ron to lead us off to give us a high-level context of the different entities in play, as well as how these different entities interplay and affect the access to the market. Ron?
Thanks, Harnath. And do you have do you have the slide with the? Yes, thank you. So from a Genentech perspective, this is a schematic that we use to keep us grounded in just all the players that are involved in the distribution, access, and reimbursement to our product. So a little bit with just background with Genentech, we have a very heavy portfolio of specialty products. And what that has tended to mean with us is we sort of starting with the end in mind of how do patients actually get access to those drugs and what does the reimbursement landscape look like. That steers us back to making decisions around what our distribution strategy is going to look like. And for many of our products, we have what we would term as a closed distribution model. So, very select set of, say, wholesalers or specialty pharmacies or secondary distributors who are contracted directly with us for getting our product out into the marketplace. And so, the way we tend to drive off of this schematic is starting with what shows up as yellow in the payer and government realm is just understanding, again, how access is really going to work from a patient perspective, and then backing into what are the facilities that patients are actually going through to get access to our product, and that being typically the clinic or hospitals or the academic institutions. And then what does that look like from a distribution perspective, highlighted in blue, and where do GPOs and our oncology network accounts get into the mix. And so for us, this is when we look at, say, a new product launch, or we're going back and looking at a strategy around a product, it's taking all of these entities into account, and a focus for us is really around, and I would say with any other company, it's really around profitability. And with Genentech being a relatively large organization, there are tendencies from time to time where there can be an emphasis put on one piece of the puzzle at a time. So an example, how would we want to say apply a different or new distribution strategy, and what type of price concessions could we offer without thinking, again, that could be siloed thinking, without having the broader perspective of, well, what does that mean from an access perspective? And if we're dealing with access issues and may have to offer some price concessions on that side, what does that end-to-end look like profitability-wise?
Great. Thanks, Ron. Joe, would you like to add your thoughts on your experience with what do you think the managed markets would, or how significant managed markets are to the pharma world today?
Sure, absolutely. I agree with Ron. He mentioned there where the drug is kind of in the life cycle, and no doubt whether it's early in the life cycle of the product or late, or it's a new product launch or it's an established the role that the managed care access has in providing the drugs to the patient have to be at the forefront of all industry's perspective on how they're going to make this available. And no doubt with the changing landscape that we've seen upheld with the Affordable Care Act, it's going to require more and more emphasis on what we're doing in this space. So, recently we looked at a survey across a number of organizations, both in large tier, mid-tier, and even small and biotech startup, and what were some of the major issues that people were dealing with in the managed care space. And it seems really from an account management level and the ability to look at the products that they have and making sure that the data that's coming in is really going to help support what the company's efforts and initiatives are, and where one of the gaps tends to reside across any of the organizations, whether it's small or big, tends to be just that analysis behind the data. How do you overlay that information so that you better understand a complete picture of what's going on within the account to meet your corporate objectives? And this was some of the key pieces of information that seems most account managers are looking for today, is how can they better help meet the organization's needs with the data that they have and the information on the different plans that they work with.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, Joe. And Gordon, this might be a good time for us to have you share what Business One, during their recent study, uncovered on market access specifically. Would you like to take a go?
Please, if you could forward to the next slide.
Yep.
Your listeners may get tired of hearing it today, but I think the theme or takeaway here is going to be about market access. And I can't emphasize that enough based, on what Joe and Ron have said here. The Affordable Care Act, healthcare reform, is really going to raise the importance, the priority of managed markets. And now, with it being implemented, what's important to know or see and understand is the dynamics of the market. What's going to change? Where are all these lives that were uncovered, now being covered, going to go? If you could move to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Again, it's important to understand how lives trend and track from a month, quarter, and annual basis. And with impact of healthcare reform now, all these unaccounted for lives are suddenly going to be picked up on Medicaid rolls. That's the assumption. Well, how will they be managed under those rules? And again, it's all going to be going to understanding the access and the barriers to that. If you could please roll ahead to the next slide. The next two slides represent data from 2011, and we're in the process now of updating this for 2012 and understanding the impact here of the Affordable Care Act. But again, key takeaways here are going to be understanding how these folks are going to be supported, and manufacturers like Astellas and Genentech are going to identify the barriers to market entry and what the access in managed markets means to them and to the payer world out there. And that includes PBMs as well as the plans. Could you go ahead, please? One more slide. So again, these are the key, what we find as a technology and data company, these are the key drivers that we find as we support our clients. We really position ourselves as a behind-the-scenes technology partner, helping our clients find the nuggets in the data that, again, show them where they are red, green, and yellow with clients with access. Essentially, are they at parity, advantaged, disadvantaged?
Great. To just touch on one other thing, maybe I can, if I may ask Ron, on the Affordability Act itself, Affordability Act, I mean, what does that mean to Genentech? Is there something that you could share?
Well, it means a lot of things to Genentech. There are plenty of implications coming out of that. I think for us, the biggest is if we start getting to a world where, so I mentioned earlier that Genentech is a very heavy, our product portfolio is very heavy in specialty products, and in the past, from a distribution perspective, that's put us in a place where we've had a large portion of our products in what we would term as a buy and bill model. And if we look at some of the implications with the Affordable Care Act, is it's shifting away from that model completely. And there are aspects of the act which really get into how average sales price is calculated and looked at, and how pricing is done in general. So for us, it's really forcing, just stepping back and looking at what does that mean without a buy and bill world, and how does that influence a change in our distribution strategy? But then more importantly, again, this theme ringing out, right? I mean, what does that mean from an access perspective? And ultimately, who's writing the scripts, and then how are patients having to deal with reimbursement on the back end of that?
Sure. Joe, do you want to add anything more from an Astellas perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the the real key pieces that we're trying to identify across the board is that healthcare spend is going to be one of the top targets to tighten budgets and cut spending. I think we're already seeing that with the federal and state policies that are going into place, and really this push towards the desire for quality of healthcare versus just the quantity. It really seems to be what's leading the government to test new payment models. And I think we're seeing this in a number of different areas across accountable care organizations, bundling of payments, advanced medical homes. And we know that just under the Affordable Care Act itself, we're going to have the expansion of coverage to a projected additional 30 million lives by 2016. So I think we're going to continue to see new insurance exchanges, expansion of Medicaid, and I think this is really going to continue to challenge us on how we're going to keep our hands around making sure that all these patients and the evolution that's going to occur in the short term can be met by the organizations.
Great. I think those were very good points, especially with the huge number of additional lives that need to be covered. I think that's the biggest challenge, at least that has come across when I've had conversations with many folks about how they're going to deal with. So, yep, a great point. With that, I think we'll move on to the next topic, which is around some of the strategies that the pharma companies are currently employing to compete in this changing dynamic marketplace. So, Joe, you want to go first and take a shot at what you think are the strategies that the pharma companies are working with today?
Sure, and Ron and Gordon may be able to better answer this, but I think the big question on people's mind is going to be the same one we've had for years: contract or not contract. I think when you really look at, dealing and working with the products and trying to make the right determination, is it best to contract with individual organizations? Is it not contract? And then making sure that you've got the right tools that are going to help you, and the data that's going into making that decision. There's no doubt that oftentimes the metrics and evaluating the decisions that have been made are where the real key emphasis is. So I see more and more of the discussion going on around how are we analyzing the contracts that have been in place and helping make better and more informed decisions moving forward.
Sure. Ron, you want to add anything around maybe the way the organizations are structuring their teams around to address this situation?
Yeah, and I would just add first, I think Joe's spot on, right? And I think for us, where we've done business cases, internal business cases in the past of just looking back at where we've made contracting decisions, and we've put, say, tools and information in place to be able to measure the effectiveness of a contract, but that really only in terms of the entire sort of product flow, and again looking at from a profitability perspective, only gives you one piece of the pie. And so we've continually had that challenge of, well, I can contract for access, right, and make sure that ease of access is a non-issue, but what does that do on the distribution side? And if I'm contracting on the distribution side, again, what does profitability really look like? And so for a larger enterprise or organization, that I would say those are somewhat typical challenges from what I've seen in my past experience. For us, what we've done to try and put structure in place to make that a little easier and try and be a little more agile around that is we focus really on are structured really in 3 different areas. So we've put an organization in place specifically around reimbursement, and that's really the managing the process and financials around reimbursement. And then on the other side of that is our contracting strategy, and where we're and that strategy is really driven around distribution and access. And then there's our account management organization that supports that. And I think we've been through probably, and I would say most likely not unlike other companies, we've probably been through 4 or 5 reorgs in the last 3 years with our account management organizations of just continually trying to refine and fine-tune and figure out a better way to actually sort of go to market with our field-based personnel to pull through on those contracting strategies. So I think that structure is probably pretty consistent where, again, you have a reimbursement component, and some emphasis around access, and then your contracting strategy and the support functions relative to that.
Sure, sure. And also, now that there is so much focus on having this separate focused teams, what about the interaction between the sales teams as well as these new teams, if you will? How do you see that increasing?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a lot more important, and I would almost I have to say this without any sales folks in the room, but one of the levers really being there's just a lot more emphasis on the managed care side of the business as the primary lever in terms of the success of a product, right? So sort of the traditional model of just pure sales and marketing and building, again, in the specialty arena, right, building relationships with physicians, it doesn't hold as much weight or have as much impact as what it has in the past, right? So now the sales model has started to shift towards more of it's a conversation between a representative and a physician about access and about copay opportunities and what reimbursement looks like. And and so as that evolves over time, there's much more, I would say, alignment between, and we've started to see this change, right, within Genentech, much more alignment between the sales side of the organization and managed care than historically.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, and I think Ron's got an excellent point. I think he's got certainly a background in incentive comp too. I think we even look at strategies of how you get out of the gate faster, what the expectations are based on different geographical areas on where that access is going to exist. So I think that's certainly a key point that all organizations are trying to figure out, whether it's launch or continued evolution of their products.
Sure. Also, given that all of this requires close interplay between the pharma companies and payers, how have you seen that relationship evolve? That's one of the key deciding things for the success for a pharma company, right? So how are you guys seeing that evolve? Joe or Ron? Maybe I can say Ron.
Yeah.
So,
Ron, you can go that.
Harnath, this is Gordon. You may want to put up that last slide because that talks to exactly the scenario I think you'd like to answer here.
Your last slide?
That triangle, yes.
Well, the triangle is later.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Gordon, if you want to take a shot at it, go ahead.
Joe, I don't want to interrupt you. If you had something to jump in there with first, go ahead.
No, go for it.
As we support organizations like Joe's and Ron's, we always find the common denominator to be data. And that data gets used and parsed differently among the different business units, from the managed markets units to the marketing, commercial ops, and sales groups. What it provides those teams is a 360-degree solution, and you need multiple disparate data sets to tell those stories to the key stakeholders in this slide, specifically plans, PBMs on the payer side, retail pharmacy, and pharma. Joe, Ron, do you have anything to jump in with?
Yeah, no, I would add to that, Gordon, right? I mean, I think for us historically, we've gotten really good at looking at history and maybe trying to make some assumptions about, based on historical trends and what the data is telling us where things are going to go. But I think we've started to make a shift now to where as the landscape is evolving so rapidly, we're looking for how do we use the data and the analytics to give us more of the early warning system, right? So how do we, how do we start taking some of that historical trends to point to maybe more quickly where there's a problem that we can address before it becomes a significant issue? And I would say, again, that's been a shift, and even for us, it's how do we tie some different data sets together that we haven't before to see where we can potentially start identifying, those small nuggets or issues before they become big problems.
And Ron, I think you bring up two distinct points here. One is the ability to do what-if forecasting and modeling, and with the traditional data sets that are out there, they're not granular enough to do that. They provide good historical trending and tracking, but that's about it. Now going forward, companies need to acquire and manage these different disparate sets of data, utilization data from typical payer, from specialty pharmacy providers out there, from retailers, to get very granular and build program design around that. What we see, and it's kind of the glass half full, glass half empty approach, is just common terminology being thrown around out there now are narrow networks, but we prefer to refer to them as high performance networks, and helping our clients match their product portfolio to payers, to retailers, what the distribution channels are, all the way to the point of consumption, dispensation, and fulfillment.
Great.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we always look for as well is with that high volume of data and all the analytics, is how do we get all of our different account managers looking, cutting, splicing the data in similar ways so that they're not going out and having to create a lot of their own ad hoc reports and trying to pull so much information from so many different sources. How do we bring that together so that everyone's really kind of evaluating and looking at things consistently through the same lens?
Great, great. Actually, that was a great segue. In fact, we jumped into our third topic for the discussion today, which was around how companies are leveraging data and using innovative techniques to bring all of this together. And like Joe mentioned, I do want to chime in here to say that at Pharma, over the last few quarters, we've worked extensively with many companies, pharma companies, large and small, and this is almost a common theme that has evolved out of every conversation, that there are always challenges around data being available not in one place. There's always disparate sources. There is always a lot of effort being put in by the team members, individual team members. Almost a lot of it is repetitive as well, where they're trying to pull these things together and then analyze it, and eventually, or most of the times, they end up having conversations where everybody is looking at slightly different views of the data set and always not being on the same page, if you will. And those conversations were the premise for the solution that Pharma is working towards. It's about bringing all of these different data sets together so that the different people on the same team are all looking at the same data set as well as the same views on the data set. So they're all slicing and dicing, like Joe alluded to, the same data set, so that they're all coming to the same conclusions, if you will. So with that, let me actually also ask, before I go further, also remind the audience that you're welcome to add your questions to the chat box. We haven't seen any yet, but feel free to go ahead and add any of the questions that you'd like the panelists to respond. So moving on, with data becoming as critical as we see, what are the challenges that you guys think, especially given that now there are so many different players, not that they're new, but all of these entities now need to work so closely together. A lot of times you start seeing a competing versus a partnering attitude between these entities, be it the payers, the PBMs, etc. So what do you guys see as challenges in, one, even getting access to some of these data sets? Ron, you want to take a shot at it first?
Yeah, and I would just go off of what Joe said earlier, right? It's at the end of the day, access to the data, I would say from our perspective, isn't a huge issue in that for the most part, money can buy the data, but then you're talking about a lot of disparate data, and how do you put it together in a meaningful way that you're going to actually be able to make good decisions off of. And and I think for us it's just a realization of given where the industry is going and where managed care in itself is going, it's sort of changing our way of life. And so the use of the information and embedding that in what our internal operations groups are doing, as well as what our account managers are doing, it's about how we need to do business in the future going forward. And again, back to what Joe had said, I think we've put some things in place for our account managers to try and make sure that they've got some analytical ways of looking at the information consistently, with still some flexibility to really drill into what's going on in their geography or with their specific accounts. So the challenge that I think that we face in that is it's still there's just a lot of manual effort that goes into finding ways to make that data meaningful, and then an exorbitant, almost to a certain degree, an exorbitant amount of effort of just trying to match and merge and tie that data together on a regular basis, because again, there are a lot of gaps and holes in it, and you're trying to fill it out to make the trends look again somewhat realistic, meaningful, and accurate.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree, Ron. It seems to be one of the biggest challenges is that you've got all the analytics, everything that you need, and whether it's that marrying or linking all those various data sets, whether they're internal pieces that you need to help make the right decisions or the external pieces, and making sure that essentially, as you're having those internal discussions, you're really looking at the business and how you're going to proceed forward and making the decisions on the same page. And that seems to be one of the constant challenges day in and day out, is how one person may be looking at it, depending on what their role or what their interest is, may not have the clear view that another individual is looking at.
Yep. And also, Joe, if you could add your thoughts around, Ron did indicate money can buy all of these data sets. Obviously, for the bigger companies like Genentech, Roche, they do have a little more of a luxury with that. What do you think are the approaches that maybe the smaller companies are taking to address this situation?
Yeah, and that's probably where I've spent most of my time, as you highlighted in my bio, is the last 9 years have really been in that biotech startup, getting that to mid-size. And I think that's really where the challenge exists for a lot of these companies. They're only buying a handful of data sets. So whether they're oftentimes, and they're trying to compete to get to those bigger levels. So I think that's really where the key opportunity is. If you're going to invest that amount of money, it's finding the right partner, it's finding the right resource and the right pieces of information that are going to help you make those contracting decisions and the analysis to become a better partner. And
sure.
I think this is where you often see that lack. If you don't have the money, what are the right pieces, or what's the right tools that are going to help you? And I think that's where you end up seeing a lot of this, and whether it's small or big, but you see a lot of people creating these ad hoc reports, cutting, splicing their own data just so it can meet the requirements.
Sure. Joe, can I also ask you to share some of the insights that we jointly worked on about where most of the conversations or the people that we discussed with during that research kind of indicated their challenge with just getting and working with data versus what it would mean if they were able to get just insights instead of going through all of that rigmarole to get to those insights, if you will. Right? You want to throw any light on how teams could be more effective if they were given that opportunity to go after insights versus data?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to hit a couple of the top-line pieces. So, it seemed like the biggest gaps that oftentimes the small and mid-sized companies were dealing with is they feel like they had enough data to help them meet the needs, but they didn't have the analytical support behind them. So oftentimes they're out there trying to match up what their goals and objectives are from the corporate perspective to trend market shares at the account level and really gain those across the geographical level to make sure that they have the right pull-through and the tactical responsibilities. Oftentimes what they're missing is how they lay that data over on top of their contract analysis. And I think that's really where the gap for that small, mid-sized company is trying to get down to the better understanding of what type of discounts they're willing to give, what potential spillover effects and their sphere of influence that they can get. They often find that difficult to manage and hard to manage, or difficult to measure and hard to manage. I don't know. Gordon's probably got, certainly with Business One, they've got some wonderful tools as well. He's probably got a greater insight in dealing with many customers across the space. I'd be curious to his insight.
Absolutely. Yeah, Gordon, if you can add your thoughts on, and while you weigh in, Gordon, if you could also touch on things like any standardization approaches that the industry is taking, and any approaches overall to lower the cost, if you will, that would be very good as well.
Sure. Joe, just to emphasize again where, organizations like yours are focusing, especially as they move from early startup phase, emerging market, to mid-tier, and then, well-established organizations, they use data in many different ways across multiple, business units there. And like you said, it's easy to go out and buy data. It's easy to go out and buy tools. But what's really your core competency as a manufacturer? And what we find more and more with our clients is they're moving away from self-service tools because they want to focus on accessing the market, understanding the market. So they expect us to package the data, manage it for them, and deliver results so they can make decisions on, rather than just having to analyze themselves.
Great.
So in that approach, though, Gordon, do you think that the data obviously comes from multiple entities, right? Is there anything that's going on in the industry to bring the way this data is being made available, the way this data is exchanged, if you will? Is there any attempts to come up with some level of standardization?
The standardization is really on the claims process and processing components. So the way a claim is managed under a pharmacy benefit, under a medical benefit, there are standards there to provide specific data elements. There are legal constraints, like HIPAA in place to protect certain components here, who and how that data can be used. So there's standardization there. As far as taking it out of multiple disparate platforms, e-prescribing solutions, electronic medical records, adjudication platforms directly off the switches, unfortunately, there's not a lot of standardization there. And again, that creates opportunities to bring the data in, find those nuggets, analyze it, and then deliver it, or package it, and then deliver it for the appropriate use.
Sure. And I'm assuming that's, again, where Business One has seen so much success that you're filling in for some of those gaps, if you will.
We do. We like to see ourselves as a force multiplier for organizations that don't want to spend the time managing the data, analyzing the data. We can do those things for them.
Great. Gordon, you mentioned a little about the data itself, but can I also ask you, since you guys cater to so many levels of the organizations or sizes of the organizations, would you see the difference in challenges when it comes to dealing with this data for the large organizations versus smaller ones?
Well, that's a very broad question there. The most common challenge is what we just talked about, data standardization. Because it's not standardized, it needs to be taken in multiple disparate feeds, put into a usable format, and then packaged and delivered. And whether it's an emerging markets organization is going to have different needs than a well-established organization that already has the infrastructure to support a lot of these requirements and make use of their requirements. A lot of it depends where their product is in the product pipeline itself. Is this pre-launch? Is it program development or post-launch uptake?
Sure. Okay. One other, or we have just a few more minutes. So wanted to get you folks to weigh in on the recent law that at least California e-pedigree law. So Ron, you want to share your thoughts on how the e-pedigree law is potentially going to impact the insights and analytics needs within the managed care market teams?
Well, I would just, so I'll build off of something that Joe had said earlier, and I think, this could be a stretch in terms of, but just the data that's available out there, and right, so, I think and then some of this is coming from the Affordable Care Act, but then other things that are going on in the industry that are driving some of the crazy prices, right? So essentially this starts with issues from a product diversion perspective, and what it, so California a couple years ago implemented an e-pedigree law which requires, maintaining a, the word that I'm looking for, maintaining a control of the product through, through all the hands that it's actually changing until it gets to the patient.
Tracking all the way. Exactly,
and and I think where we see that heading, and again, this is hedging some bets on how the government is going to, anticipating the government to follow the California law and how the California law is going to evolve and what stipulations they have in place for specific tracking around e-pedigree by 2014 is that we start moving to where that actually becomes electronic, right? So, you could start seeing the scanning of, say a label on a vial or on a, on a pill box, and being able to track that from one entity to another all the way to where, again, for a specialty product that's an injectable, the scanning of a vial that now you have a specific lot number that is tied to an electronic medical record for a particular patient, right? And so, that starts to provide even more insights into sort of the total flow of product. And, you want to talk data, I mean, we have an overload of data today, just what that could ultimately lead towards. And I think, for some of that to become feasible, e-pedigree, there are very loose standards around that today, which is why it hasn't been implemented fully and why it's taking so long. And same thing with electronic medical records. There's a lot of unclarity there in terms of what standards hospital systems or prescribing facilities would be required to meet and the timelines around that. So it's just, for us, it's something worth keeping an eye on, and there's opportunity, there's opportunity for greater insights, knowing that there's going to be a lot of work that likely goes along with that.
Sure. Gordon, there was this recent DOJ report on the same subject, again, extending it out from the California context to a national context, if you will. So you want to share any insights from that?
Sure. I think the purpose of that DOJ report and the findings associated with it are to emphasize 2 points: safety and fraud. Patient safety is always, the utmost concern for everyone, through the supply chain here. On the fraud side, especially for manufacturers, they have to protect their interests here. Products, are being pushed in the supply chain at specific prices for specific uses, and there are folks within that supply chain taking advantage of the government pricing programs, specifically like 340B. And as Ron had mentioned, a lot of diversion occurs around those products. It's meant for one audience to specifically benefit that audience, and others take advantage of it strictly from a profit and spread perspective.
Sure. Great. I think we are coming up to the time to, let me quickly check on the questions that we've received from the audience. One question, Gordon, the data and analytics support for end of life of products. Sorry, end to end of the product life cycle. Sorry, I misread that. So let me repeat that. How is data and analytics supports the end to end of the product life cycle?
Could you go to the next slide, please? I think it specifically addresses that across the a particular life cycle process here.
Sure.
And again, it's understanding where the product is in its life cycle. Is it pre-launch, launch, or post-launch uptake? And different data sets are used to analyze the market upfront to understand what the barriers to entry, even before a molecule is taken, up for approval. Is there a real market opportunity here? Is this another Me Too? Why do we need that? So understanding the pre-launch requirements, and then at launch, using data to become very focused and targeted, what we refer to as building high-performance networks. Understand where the payers are, how they're affiliated to the PBMs and the actual physicians, what's the reimbursement code, what's the pricing information around that, and then building contracting strategies around that, which then ties into the post-launch uptake process of pull-through and measurement and then program refinement.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think you touched on it, I definitely see it in your slide, is just knowing where the product is in the life cycle, but also what's that competitive landscape. Certainly is going to add into that contracting strategy as well. Are you going into a market that's crowded, or are you going in kind of as the first to entry? I think that part of the analytics, regardless of where it is on the life cycle, certainly has to be a part of that decision making.
Joe, you bring up a really good point, something that's so simple but so often overlooked, and what we've created is something that we commonly refer to as a planned playbook, so everyone understands it, whether they're a PBM, whether they're the manufacturer. What does the target market look like, and what are the competitors in that, and how do you build a program around it? And it's essentially you build a very specific set of metrics and analytics to guide folks through that.
Yeah.
That was great.
What other questions do we have, Hernath?
Yeah, I am just going through that list. Give me a quick second here. I see a few questions. How do I make this? You guys read that? 1 second, trying to get to. Okay, one question is, can someone comment on utilization data being perfect but late and syndicated data being more timely but less accurate because trended? Which data set to use to make the best contracting decision?
It's the age-old question.
It is, and that's why it takes multiple data sets to get that answer.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is we talked about that survey across the different companies. That was the one thing that came up consistently, where maybe from a sales and marketing perspective you're using one number, but from a contracting you're using another number. I think it goes back to the organization. If the organization has made a decision, the stake in the ground of this is the number they're going to use, then I think you have to build your assumptions off of that. And oftentimes, depending on the organization, it may not always be the number that the account managers are hoping for.
Yeah, and I would add, I concur with that, Joe. I mean, I think we actually do a lot of internal communication, and this is coming from like a sales ops and managed care ops perspective of just that there are differences between data sources and there are different uses, and even internally, right, when it's just kind of coming back to what decision are we trying to make, and historically what data source have we used to make that decision. And again, it's just that extra sort of change management effort that continually has to happen to get people's heads wrapped around, here's what we're all looking at the same number.
Well, Ron, and kudos to your organization, because I know they use multiple data sets to validate multiple points and the decision-making process, and that's what it requires. There isn't a magic bullet out there, one data set that will get you everything you need.
Agreed.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, here's the second question, folks. Can you give more details around the hardest data integration step? Is it formulary data, utilization data, or contract definitions?
Oh, I would say, just from being a technology and data vendor, it's the contracting data, because that is very proprietary to organizations.
Yeah, I would agree.
Contracting data is this? Okay.
Sure. Yep.
And I have, I think, one last question. Oh, can I get a copy of the presentation slides? Yes, we will have a copy of the presentation slides made available to you folks who have attended this webinar. Another question, how does Pharma manage the cleansing and alignment of data from different vendors? Well, that answer will probably take a whole session in itself. But I just want to say that given that Pharma has been working with data for over 15 years, we have built a lot of IP and reusable components that we are able to bring to bear to help lay out the overall, because data, when it begins with, it's not just the raw data, right? Yeah, there are a lot of steps that is involved in getting that data to that final form, and including data governance, including master data management aspects, etc. So we do have that end-to-end expertise, as well as are able to bring that to bear to our customers, if you will. So the person who asked this, if you are more interested, please shoot us a note and we can have a separate conversation on this. Finally, questions around, is there any big data play in these, in managed care, if you will? So Gordon, Ron, you guys want to weigh in on any big data, which is like you're getting data from your social media, or even surveys, or getting comments from your field? How do you guys see that starting to play in?
And I would absolutely agree with that statement and use of big data. I think the healthcare industry has to learn from the retail industry how they use data for targeting, marketing purposes, and again, a lot of those models have application in the healthcare industry.
Sure, but have you guys seen any initiatives around taking advantage? Yes, there is definitely conversation to try and mimic what the other sectors have done, but have you guys seen any progress, any steps that your teams or other teams may have taken towards this?
We do. We've got a pilot going on in using new visualization technology, and then bringing in other big data sets like Experian, socioeconomic data, to understand spheres of influence around certain geographic payers, their dispensing sites, specialty pharmacies, closed-door specialty pharmacies, the affiliated physicians. So we see it having significant impact, especially on pull-through programs, and defining what types of pull-through programs in specific geographic regions are going to make most sense and have the most uptake.
Sure, sure. Well, I think the question also would beg us to have a summer version of the response, I'd say. So yes, very specific to that need. We've also seen this solution already being implemented in some of our other industry segments. Financial services, again, one of those leaders when it comes to adopting some of these leading-edge technologies. We already have some solutions in play. But we also strongly believe that bringing this into the healthcare world, into the life sciences world, is going to be critical over the next few quarters. We are making very major investments in building out a platform and a framework that can be leveraged by the pharma world, if you will. We already have connectors to many of these sources in the unstructured world, whether they're blogs or your Facebook or Twitter feeds, etc. And we are also bringing in all of the semi-structured stuff in the enterprises, from your survey results and Excel sheets and spreadsheets, etc., into the mainstream structured world of analytical processing, and then combining all of these data sets to provide insights that we believe businesses will be able to leverage more effectively. Going back to see if there are any other questions. No, I don't see any other new questions. You folks have any other closing comments that you would like to make? Ron?
I would just say thanks for the good discussion, you guys, and for the questions as well. And yeah, I mean, this is fun and interesting for me. And a couple of years ago, I made a decision I wanted to really get deeper on the managed care side of Genentech's business, and having this foresight of that's where, again, the levers in terms of where the industry goes are really going to reside there. And I've continued to see sort of that trend evolve. And so, yeah, I have a lot of energy and passion around this, and would open myself up to if anyone wants to have some conversations as well, even offline. I'm happy to share my contact info.
Excellent. Thank you, Ron. Joe?
Thanks to you, Harnath, and thanks to Sama for putting this on, and the attendees as well. So I look forward to seeing more of the solutions and strategies that you guys bring forward. I think they'll be welcome as welcome tools to everyone's armamentarium as they're trying to handle the challenges. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Joe, for acknowledging that. Gordon?
I'd like to thank Sama for touching on such a timely topic. It's very important in the future of healthcare, where it's going, and then being able to pull in experts like Joe and Ron that, I mean, are so inundated and live this day to day. It's very valuable information getting it from these guys directly. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate your comments. And I do want to take a moment to thank all three of you folks. I mean, I know Ron, Joe, and Gordon, you guys have pretty busy schedules, so appreciate you partnering with us on this webinar. We do intend to have a series of these. This is the first of that, so do expect some more communication towards the next set of webinars. And also the launch of our managed care solution, which is addressing many of the things that were discussed today, trying to help many of the team members who are currently grappling with a lot of the effort in getting data together, figuring out how things are, cleansing them, and bringing them together to actually make those insights. What we are attempting to help is to eliminate a lot of that prep work and provide pre-built insights, if you will, so that business folks can actually focus and spend their time on leveraging those insights to make those business decisions than spend time trying to arrive at those insights. With that, I'd like to thank all the members who have attended this. We hope if you have any questions, you'll feel free to reach out to us. I will put up our final slide, which has my contact information. There you go. And look forward to having you on our next set of webinars. Thank you again, and have a great day, everybody.